Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us, speak up, stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us, speak up, stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
And welcome, everybody, to a wonderful day right here on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. And if you're an avid listener, you may be like, hold on a second. I think I heard your voice yesterday, too. You did. We had all the hosts came in and we did a 2-hour-long episode yesterday for Giving Tuesday, just in order to kind of let everybody hear what we have going on, what we're working on. Of course, we had some discussions on a few important things. And so if you wanted to, if you missed the chance to give, well, you can still partner with us here at Kentucky's Voice by texting KY Voice to 53555, 53555. You can text KY Voice if you want to jump in there, help out what we're doing here. Also today, as I go through these stories, and I'll be laying out what we're doing, you can text 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970. You can text in your comments, your concerns, your questions, and they'll send them up to me here. And in the last segment, I typically respond to those. So feel free to get those in. Once again, 502-571-0970. And on today's show, we're having quite the flare-up between the Beshear administration and financial transparency. One is happening with the Trump administration. Right now, Kentucky is facing potentially a pause on SNAP benefits again, almost like relying on the government to feed you maybe isn't the best call. So we'll be digging into that story. Why is it that the Trump administration may be pausing benefits to Kentucky, and why this isn't Trump's fault, but absolutely 100% Andy Beshear's fault as he shrugs off financial transparency. Also, if you listen to my weekend show here on WGTK, comes on Sundays at 6, the Andrew Cooperrider Show, or if you listen to the Andrew Cooperrider Show podcast, which you can check out by visiting theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com. You heard me go in depth covering about Beshear shrugging off financial transparency when it comes to turning over budget documents. And I want to take a second there to discuss a little bit further about what we should be doing there, only because we're coming up on the budget session. And that is, of course, a very important topic to be covering. And really, it ties into the fact that Beshear seems to be hiding things that are going on financially within the state. It leaves some questions as well. It leaves some deep questions. So we've got the food stamp fiasco, we've got budget documents being hidden, we've got all these issues happening with the Beshear administration. So we'll talk about what Republicans should do when they're in session and how they should respond. And also, because we're coming up on in session and coming up on Christmas too as well, I figured I might take a moment to talk about the kinds of legislation that we should be seeing passed this next legislative session. What should the Republicans in Kentucky, as they have 80% control of the legislature, be focusing on this next session? They had their retreat a few weeks ago. I know what they say they're going to be focusing on, so we'll be digging into that as well. So we've got a fun-filled, fully packed show. It's your opportunity, though, to get involved with the show. Those of you who listen to me know that in the last segment of this show, I always deal with your texts. I'll go through them. So once again, that text number to join into the conversation, 502-571-0970. 502-571-0970. So that's a text in your responses. Of course, we want to hear from you, hear what you have to say. and it always adds to it too when I hear what you guys have to chime in with. Now, if you want to send over bad things, negative things, I do have to warn you, producer in the back does screen the text messages, and if they're too mean or they will hurt my feelings, he does not share them with me most of the time. Sometimes he does just because I find it funny and hilarious when I hear some of the liberals losing it. Who sits there and hate listens to an entire radio program? I don't know. But there are some out there who do it, and those of you who are doing it, we laugh at you. We laugh at you constantly. But we'll be back here in about another minute, kicking off into these stories here on Kentucky's Voice. Your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. We'll see you back here very shortly.
Back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here on Kentucky's Voice, your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. Once again, you want to join into the conversation, shoot us over a text that tells us how you feel. You can text 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970. If you want to donate, text KY Voice to 53555. Now, those of you who have a memory that lasts longer than a few months may recall that during this most recent, the longest in history, government shutdown, SNAP benefits became quite a sticking point. And of course, there was a big fight over whether or not the Trump administration could fund them or not. Did they have enough money to keep funding them? It was a real argument back and forth. But one of the things that we saw to Beshear was he really used this as an opportunity to try to say, look, feeding people isn't political. In fact, he made this post here with a video on it that says, the caption to it says, either you're for feeding people or you're not. It doesn't get to be partisan. I'm committed to fighting hunger regardless of where the politics fall. And he attached that with a little video. Let's take a listen here to what he had to say.
If you believe in fighting hunger, it should never be partisan. So I was a little disappointed that some of the loud voices we heard saying state government needed to step up and add more money to senior meals never spoke out when the president refused to pay SNAP benefits. Either you're for feeding people or you're not. It doesn't get to be partisan. I'll always do the right thing, making sure that there are enough for our Kentucky families, regardless of where the politics fall.
Well, you heard it from him right there. Either you're for feeding people or you're not. Either you want to see people starve in the street or you're no good, dirty, rotten partisan. Or at least that's what Beshear would claim. But it's odd that he doesn't attach the same thought process of, hey, feeding people doesn't have to be partisan, as he fights against the Trump administration here. So what the Trump administration is overall attempting to do, they recognize that things like Social Security, things like Medicaid, Medicare, things like the SNAP program, they are very large line items in the budget, and they have grown a huge amounts. And a part of the conversation of how do we deal with this overreaching, overbearing bill. And you've heard some Republicans that, I I don't necessarily agree with them all the time, have said that we need to just cut benefits overall, raise the retirement age of Social Security. You've heard some different conversations like that, and maybe that's an argument to be had. But the Trump administration wisely is saying, look, instead of worrying about doing that right now, let's worry about a very specific issue that could help with this line item of the budget, that could help us way into the future, and that's dealing with fraud, waste, and abuse within these systems. This has included Medicare, Medicaid. This has included SNAP benefits, several other places. He's also simultaneously trying to deal with deporting the most amount of people as possible. And part of deporting illegal immigrants, they've wanted people to self-deport. And if you want people to leave your country, a big way to do that would be to go ahead and make sure they can't continue to leech off the system. They can't continue to suck us dry. They can't continue to be a mosquito carrying malaria that poisons the rest of our system. So how do you get somebody to leave? Well, much like stray cats, if you stop feeding them, they'll leave you alone. And if you feed the stray cats, eventually they will have kittens underneath your porch. And now you're dealing with a lot more cats, okay? In the same way that if you stop feeding, you stop medically treating, you stop giving them benefits paid for by the taxpayer to people that aren't even supposed to be here in the first place. Their very existence within the country is illegal, hence why they're called illegal immigrants. If we stopped supporting and enabling their law breaking, perhaps, maybe perhaps, they might leave, much like the stray cat would if you stopped feeding them. Talking to you guys, feeding stray cats outside the studio. I'm just kidding. It's all right that they lay in my car and leave paw prints. Anyways, but if we stop feeding the stray cats, they will leave. If you stop feeding the illegal immigrants, they will leave. They'll go back home. And so, in the same thought process, they're saying, well, they're not supposed to be getting these benefits. Illegal immigrants are not supposed to be getting Medicaid. They're not supposed to be getting Medicaid. They're not supposed to be getting food stamps. They're not supposed to be getting all these other things. So let's kick them off of it. And so a part of that push has been the Trump administration has come in and said, hey, look, we want to see the immigration status, the names and immigration status of who's receiving this federal benefit. Pretty simple request. In fact, a request that 29 states have already complied with. And when those 29 states submitted their data, what was found was about 1.6 to 1.7 million people receiving benefits from SNAP benefits that otherwise would be ineligible. Now, it just so happens that these 29 states are all the states led by Republicans. These are predominantly Republican states as well, that obviously already have issues politically with taking care of illegal immigrants, using taxpayer funds to give them benefits that they aren't even supposed to be eligible for in the first place. So if the states that have a political desire to take care of this issue found 1.6, 1.7 million people receiving benefits that aren't eligible, well, then how many do you think would show up in administrations run by people whose political desires are actually to keep the illegal immigrants here? And to put some numbers on this, if you think the average recipient of food stamps is receiving $350 a month, let's say, these people receiving benefits, we don't know how many kids or anything else, or even if we go lower and take this 1.7 million and say that 1.7 million we're receiving on average, let's say $150 a month in food stamps benefits, if that's just individuals, that's $255 million a month. $255 million a month. We're talking $3-4 billion a year saved just by making sure that the people receiving these benefits out of these 29 states are the proper people. Now, you may be asking, what about these other 21 states that won't share the data? Well, Kentucky falls into that category. Beshear has patently refused to turn over the data, turn over the spreadsheets saying who receives benefits and their names and their immigration statuses. Are they eligible to be receiving these benefits? Have you checked? Beshear's refused. Now, a part of the refusal comes from, they claim, privacy concerns. That's the biggest claim and argument that we hear in the courts from the Democrats. There's privacy concerns. Well, first off, if you're going to be receiving government subsidies, if you're going to be receiving money out of my pocket, out of your pocket, if you're going to be getting money from us, taken from us with force, you lose any right you had to privacy. The minute you start getting free things from the government, you no longer have a right to hide your immigration status and who you are from the government. You're receiving a benefit from them. This isn't hard to understand. But yet he's refusing to turn it over. So now the USDA and the Trump administration is responding by saying, look, if you do not get this in here in the next 5 days, I believe December 8th is the deadline. If you do not get it in, we're going to pause food stamp benefits, SNAP benefits to your state until you get us this data. A reasonable request. They're saying, look, we already found $255 million a month in fraud. Just how the states that responded. It is reasonable of a request from the administration to say, let's dig into these numbers, because if we can save $500 million or so a month, that really helps out the bottom line. It also provides us either an opportunity, one, to cut taxes to the American citizens, or two, it also provides us the ability to maybe expand benefits if that's necessary for American citizens, or better yet, just save money, pay down our debt. I mean, this is insane. We're literally going into debt. I would bet, considering the states have submitted the data and then the populations, because you got to think, these states that aren't submitting the data, we're talking California, New York. These are populous states not putting over this data. So when you consider, yes, 29 states have, but population-wise, I don't think we've gotten to 50%. It would not be extreme at all to say we're going to save $500, $600 million a month on this program just by getting in this data. And yet these Democrat governors, including Beshear, are saying, oh, no, that's a step too far. That's a step too far. But then you also have other financial transparency concerns as well. And what's interesting to me is what the liberals and the Democrats base are saying to somehow support this. Because obviously we have the conservative base sitting here saying, look, just like me, look, we're talking big bucks here. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars a month saved. So what are the Democrat base saying back? Well, I'll tell you what they've been saying, because I've been posting about this on social media. They've been responding. But if you want to jump in, submit your comments, you can text 502-571-0970. We'll be back here in a few short minutes to continue this discussion.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR
to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. As always, if you want to join into the conversation, what we're talking about here, talking about transparency, talking about what's going on within the state regarding SNAP benefits, also Medicare, Medicaid, we'll hit upon that here in a second, and the fact that we have so many ineligible people receiving these benefits, that extreme cost to the taxpayer. You can text us, though, with your comments at 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970. Before the break, I was talking about Beshear refusing to turn in this data to the federal government, to the Trump administration, in order to search out and find where people are receiving ineligible benefits they otherwise wouldn't qualify for, mostly because they are illegal immigrants. They want to see the immigration status of those receiving SNAP benefits. So, and as I said in the last bit, we're not even talking about the most populous states, but 29 states have submitted their data. They found between $250 to $500 million of wasteful spending per month just there. When you start adding in these other states, you get into amounts where we're talking $500 million to $1 billion a month of fraud and waste going on within the SNAP program. People receiving benefits that otherwise shouldn't. And I mentioned that, and part of us giving illegal immigrants these benefits is why they keep sticking around compared to going home. But that's not the only place where we've seen issues. Keep in mind, too, that the administrative costs of the food stamp program is 50-50 split with the state. And the more people we have on the program, especially ineligible people, the more administrators we need. That is directly costing the state taxpayer funds. I mean, we have federal taxpayer, which we all are, that it wastes all of our money. But if you're talking about state level spending, well, we have the administrative costs is a 50-50 split, and Beshear's running that bill up as well. That's affecting our state budget, and we'll dig into that here in a second. But there's another point of waste, fraud, and abuse that has been identified. This coming from the Kentucky State Auditor, which found from her 2025 audit report, this is Auditor Allison Ball here, found concurrent payments. So they said that she found that Kentucky paid for the same Medicaid recipients simultaneously with other states during a 4-year period, resulting in over $800 million in improper payments. $800 million. She also found double, triple, or quadruple payments. The report indicates a waste of funds that resulted in individuals receiving payments for services that were not necessary and then paying providers several times over for the same costs. And then in a separate finding from 2021, the audit by the Office of Inspector General found that Kentucky had claimed millions in unallowable school-based Medicaid administrative costs, which were not properly submitted for review and approval. So what we have going on here is we have a governor that is most likely enabling or tacitly allowing SNAP benefit fraud, unwilling to turn over these documents. And then we also have him enabling, and through either poor management or purposefully, who's to say, allowing $800 million a year to be wasted in Medicare, Medicaid, according to the state auditor. We're talking, guys, billions a year here. Just flushed down the toilet. And you know what's funny is when you bring up these issues, you'll hear a lot of the same adage, especially on the food issue. You'll hear an adage from those on the left that you're not a good Christian. Who cares what somebody's immigration status is? Who cares about this or that? Who cares? Just give them food. You're a bad Christian. You're not a real Jesus follower if you're not willing to use the power of government to just, feed the masses, of course. But what they miss is that, and this is why these people are not, if they are real Christians, they clearly are either, they have some sort of strange pastoral counseling going on. Their pastor is clearly reading some weird version of the Bible I haven't read. Because I've searched. I've searched the Bible many times over. I've read it in its entirety a few times. And I have never found the line in the Bible that says be charitable, give to others. I have found that. And then, period. But if somebody doesn't want to be charitable, go ahead and use the force of government, which ultimately means use the force of imprisonment, because if you don't pay your taxes, what's going to happen? Men with guns will show up and arrest you, deprive you of your liberty, and throw you in jail. So use the force of government to make people be charitable. I've never found that. I never heard the Jesus teaching where he said, be charitable. And if your neighbor doesn't want to be charitable, well, have the Romans bring some spears and make them be charitable. No, he wants us to choose to do it. And there's wisdom there too as well, because when you are picking how to be charitable, who to be charitable to, it provides a certain amount of oversight that you don't see with the government. You probably personally know the people you're being charitable with. You know what their needs are, but also that personal relationship creates shame. And that's the thing missing from our system. It's not just the waste and fraud, but man, the shame is missing. It used to be shameful to have to ask for help. And by having to look somebody in the eye and say, I have failed to feed my family. I've failed to take care of them. Can you please help me? And by saying that and looking somebody in the eye, it created shame that encouraged you to go out there and actually, fix the problem, get off the dole, provide for your own family. But that shame is missing. And it's not going to just stop with food. No. You think that they're just going to come in and force you all to give money for food? You are completely mistaken here. We've got this video from Bashir. This came shortly after the government shutdown lifted, so the food was no longer a fight. And he posted this with the caption, here, let's go ahead. Let's play the video, and then I'll tell you what the caption said. Go ahead and play that video.
We have to tell the people of America not just who we're against, but what we're for. I think one of the most concerning threats to this nation is how many people think the American dream is now no longer in reach. We've got to be the party that rekindles that American dream, that provides more housing, that lowers utility costs, that makes it so you can not only afford your grocery bill at the end of the month, but to take your family on that same vacation that you could go on growing up. That's what the next generation deserves, and that's what we should be delivering.
So the caption there is Americans should not only be able to pay their grocery bill or rent, they should also be able to afford the same family vacation for their kids that they had growing up. That's what families deserve, and that's what we should be delivering. So there you have it from Bashir. Now the promise isn't just food. That's not where they're going to stop. It's not just housing. They're not going to stop there. Now he wants the government, Bashir wants the government to deliver vacations. Leisurely, They throw around a lot about, Hitler and Nazis, but that is one thing the Germans did do leading up into World War II. The Nazis did have their holiday camps, their government-sponsored vacations, where it was very regimented, and you went to all expense-paid trips on the government dole, on the taxpayer dime. And while they're there, they made sure to program you into Nazi propaganda, of course. But last I checked, I can't find it in the Constitution. I can't even find in the Constitution where it says you have a right to food, let alone a right to a vacation. This is a failure to understand what government's role is. Government's role is to protect our basic rights, our rights to property, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to keep and bear arms, and then otherwise get out of our way. The job of the government is not to turn around and make sure that the ails of life, the fact that we live in a fallen world and bad things happen, they're going to make sure that goes away as well. They are not God as much as Bashir loves to pretend to be. As much as he used the folksy Mr. Rogers, I believe that we should feed everybody on this planet. They're not God. They can't do it. And the fact they keep reaching for it is why they continue to fail. Well, coming up here in a little bit, we have more talk about budgets. We'll have that here. Want to get in your comments? 502-571-0970. We'll be back in a few short minutes.
to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here on Kentucky's Voice, your host for the day, Andrew Cooprider, your Wednesday host. So make sure if you love what I'm saying, you love hearing me, you love seeing me, you tune in on Wednesdays. So we did have a voice message actually come in, but we prefer text because I had to hear it through the speaker. But we had a voice message come in I want to talk about real quick because that leads into the next kind of topic I wanted to mention. But if you want to text in your comments, your concerns, your thoughts, you can text us at 502-571-0970. Once again, 502-571-0970. And so this gentleman had sent in a message talking about how all government documents, all government information should be available to the public, should be available for audit unless it's classified. And oh boy, do I have a video I want to play you all. Now, if you listen to my Sunday show, you would have heard this. It's a little bit longer. It's about 3 minutes long. It's worth hearing again. And I posted on my Twitter, and it's a hearing that took place between Jason Petrie, sorry. He's the chair of the Budget and Revenue Committee, and Hicks, Budget Director Hicks. So he works for the governor. He's out of the Office of Budget Director, whatever the title is, and that's Hicks. And then you had Stack, who's also who's head of CHFS, Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Dr. Stack. And then they were having a hearing. Now, the original point of this hearing was about the senior meals program. Feeding people, I guess, is the overall thing of today. And so in this hearing, what they were discussing was about the fact that this meals program, maybe you've seen this was a few months ago, was suddenly $9 million short. $9 million short. Actually, if you're listening to the show earlier on, you hear Bashir reference that in his video that he did about the food stamp program, about how the Republicans that said just find the money, we're now, not calling on the administration, just find the money during a government shutdown to issue out food stamp payments. And in that, what had happened is the seniors meals program grew by 55% over 2 years. The senior meals program within the state, they had a waiting list. They've always had a waiting list. And when they got one-time COVID money in, they went ahead and they used it to expand out the list. And it became apparent to them in May they were going to run out of money. Despite that, they kept enrolling people and kept spending. And it wasn't until they were out that they bothered to say anything. And then Bashir was magically able to find $9.1 million somewhere hidden within the budget. And so rightfully so, the budget hearing wanted to have a hearing about this, because one of the things the media was pushing out there was that this funding occurred because this funding gap occurred because of the Trump administration, because of some policy. The Trump administration just drew the rug out from underneath Kentucky. And now magically, we have no money for the senior meals program. However, that wasn't the case. They knew back in May. And so part of that hearing, it comes out that obviously, for those of you who aren't following it, our state has had a drop in revenues. It's not pulling in as much tax funds as they used to be. On top of that, you have, of course, the inflation causing rising costs. You have other things that they're spending money on, all those issues. But a part of that was that these cabinets had to submit a reduction plan. And the chair of the budget committee asked to see those reduction plans, how to save money, another financial document, and the Bashir administration flat out refuses to turn it over. I think we had the video here. Let's go ahead. And so we'll have the video here for you in a second. But it's important for you to hear what this is. Like I said, I already had played this on a prior show. My own show, not this show. But I do want to play it again because it's so jaw-dropping. And the defense of this is mind-numbing to me. Because remember, for those of you who are unaware, the legislature creates the budget, okay? Now, the way they do this, the way it's typically done, is they appropriate large amounts of funds into a pot. Okay, so when you do your budget at your house, maybe you sit down and you sit there and say, okay, I'm going to spend this amount on insurance, this amount on groceries, this amount on gas, this amount on this amount on extracurricular activities, this amount on eating out, this amount on recreation, whatever. That's not how the government budgets. Well, at least the state of Kentucky. It's not how the state of Kentucky budgets. I wish they did budget that way, but that's not how they budget. Instead, they budget in a little bit different of a way where they appropriate large amounts of funds into a pot, and then it's up for the Beshear administration to decide how they want to spend that money. That's why when the Beshear administration sits there and claims, oh, I don't have funds for this, or I don't have funds for that. Well, that falls on deaf ears when it comes to the legislature because they know they've appropriated hundreds of millions of dollars for that department. And if you're saying you don't have the money for something, it's because you're spending it elsewhere, but that's your decision. Nobody told the Beshear administration they had to spend it there. And this behavior from the Beshear administration, we saw this with when the legislature passed a bill this past year that dealt with Medicaid and mainly Medicaid, but Medicare and Medicaid payments going to paying for gender transition surgeries. The Beshear administration tried to not implement that law, claiming they didn't have the funds to do so. There are several other laws, too, most of them that Beshear had vetoed, that then magically, when it came time for them to enforce the laws passed by the legislature, I don't have the money to do it. This is very infuriating to the legislature. And I hope it forces them to go to a zero-based budgeting where they do say, you know what, never mind. We can't trust you with large swaths of money to do with what you want to do with because, well, you just can't be trusted. So instead, we're going to tell you dollar for dollar, cent for cent, what you're going to be spending money on. That should be what they're doing. And they're getting pushed in that direction because of the fact that the Beshear administration just refuses to work with the legislature at all. Beshear wants to talk about things don't have to be partisan. Things don't have to be political. Well, first off, definitionally, anything the government does is political. Politics, as the definition of it, is simply the act of how to govern or run an area, to run a government. So anytime the government does anything or wants the government to do anything, that is political, definitionally. But in his desire to claim, well, it's not political. It's not. We just need to work with one another. But then you have altercations where you have the budget committee asking for budget documents, and then they refuse to turn it over. It's not just with the federal administration. That isn't the only people they're hiding documents from, which is insane on its own. But then you also have the state level hiding documents from. The auditor, at one point this year, the auditor had to sue to get access to documents regarding these tornado funds. So for those of you who pay attention to it, whenever there's a natural disaster, Beshear opens up some government fund that then people can donate money into. Literally taking money that otherwise would go to private charities that I think all of us believe would do a better job. But instead, he goes ahead and takes in this funds, takes in this money, and then it's now for his to control. Because that wasn't appropriated through the legislature. It isn't quote-unquote tax dollars, so the legislature has no ability to tell Beshear how to spend these pots of tens of millions of dollars. And so in order to get eyes on these charitable accounts, the auditor wanted to get access to those accounts. Said, I want to see what we're spending money on. I want to see where this is going out to. Famously, one of the things that occurred here, this is funny. When Ball was treasurer, she caught this kind of after the fact, but after people started calling in. So out of one of these funds, Beshear cut $1,500 checks out to anybody that he says was damaged by the tornadoes. And in that process, he ends up cutting checks to people for $1,500 out of these accounts that people donated money into that were never damaged by the tornadoes in the first place. Like, large amounts of them. And then when Ball asked, how did you get this list of people? He said, well, I got it from FEMA. I asked FEMA for the list of people, and they gave me this list. But then FEMA turns around and says, we never gave him a list. We don't know where he got that info from. And it came right before election time. And then Auditor Ball wants to take a look at those accounts. No. Not for you to look at. This is money that was donated to, apparently Beshear believes. Beshear says the money was donated to me to spend however I want to. So we'll have this video here where we have out of the chamber, out of the committee hearing, the budget hearing, when we come back. Also, we'll be fielding your texts, your questions, your comments. So if you want to get those in, go ahead and text 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970. You can get your comments, your thoughts in on what we're covering today. We're talking about government transparency. We're talking about Beshear not being open with both the Trump administration and the state. We'll have this altercation that occurred within the chamber when we come back, and then we'll be dealing once again with those texts, with those questions. So you can text us 502-571-0970. Otherwise, we'll be back here in a few short minutes.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
Understand that each cabinet is supposed to be coming up as of early October, coming up with a plan for those reductions and how to address them on their own. Have you submitted that to the executive branch?
Yeah, that's all processed through OSPD.
So you have. Secretary Hicks, have all the cabinets done that?
Yes, we have draft plans from
They've all
cabinets.
complied?
Yes, they have. All the cabinets have. Yes.
Okay, can you get those same plans from each of the cabinets to us within 14 days also?
No, sir.
Okay, why not?
Those are preliminary draft plans that we're going to take into consideration before the governor makes his recommendation. And when the governor makes his recommendation, I'll be happy to provide those details to you.
Yeah, so why can we not have a copy of a reduction plan that a cabinet secretary has submitted?
Because it's an input to a decision that the governor makes. It's not a decision that the cabinet makes.
Fine. I'm not looking for the governor's insight. I'm looking for the cabinet's insight and looking for their input. So, no.
The answer is no.
You understand what was that word that was used in the prior presentation? What was that? Do you remember it? Collaboration. This has been going on since 21, where we try to collaborate. Nope, wait for the budget address. Nope, wait. Nope, wait. This is not politics. This is policy. This is budget. This affects Kentuckians. It's not a presidential race. It's not any other race. It affects Kentuckians. I find it atrocious, abhorrent, that the executive branch can't share information about potential plans on how to deal with budgets that affect Kentuckians in unbelievable ways. Wait for the budget address. Wait for it. How about collaboration? Put us under an NDA, put us under a whatever.
So there you go.
need.
That was a video from the budget hearing that happened early November. What's going on there is Representative Petrie is asking for the reduction plans or other budget cut plans that the cabinet heads have submitted into the governor, and he wants to take a look at them. Why does he want to see them and not get the governor's budget address? Well, because he knows, the way we all do, that Beshear's running for president, and if he doesn't want Beshear's spin, because, if you cut funding to something that maybe has a good name, like maybe there's a program called the Fun for Puppies and how much puppies love getting pet. And so it's a fun for petting puppies. But really what the program does is, throws puppies off a bridge. And so they say, look, that's a waste of money. We don't need to be doing that. But Beshear's worried that if he puts forward a cut of funding to that program, the headlines will be, Beshear cut funds to petting puppies. That's what he's concerned about. And they don't want that spin. They want to know, where can we save money at? Let's hear from the people who are running these government departments where the waste is going on at. And the budget director, Hicks, there is refusing to turn over these financial documents. It is not the governor who makes the budget. It is the legislature. They don't need the governor's input. In fact, the last budget we made, they put out their initial draft budget before Beshear ever put out his budget because they were tired of waiting on the guy. And what do they say? No, we don't want to turn it in. We don't want to turn it over. If you have comments, you want to get them over, you can text 502-571-0970. I'm going to work through those now. 502-571-0970. First text here coming in. The actions you described by King Andy are basically those of a dictator. He wants to dictate everything. And that's pretty accurate. I mean, he literally, every single thing, for a guy who claims that he doesn't want things to be political, literally everything's a fight. Dumb things. are a fight. And they don't need to be. But every single thing is an argument or a fight because he doesn't want the legislature's opinion on anything. He doesn't want to work with them. At this point, he's worried about headlines. That's why he's, I'm suing the Trump administration. I'm suing the Trump administration. So that way, when he gets up on that debate stage during the Democrat primary for president, he can sit there and claim, I sued the president. I'm fighting Trump. That's what he wants. There we go. We got another one here. The state of Kentucky is not a charity. The bottom line is who will be punished and held accountable for fraudulent spending. Alongside that, we also have tar and feather need to return. That's two different people sent that in. But one person said the state of Kentucky is not a charity. The bottom line is who will be punished and held accountable for fraudulent spending. And then the other person kind of echoing those sentiments of holding people accountable. Tar and feather needs to return. Here's the deal. I believe it was Madison who said, I struggle to find the line in our Constitution that allows us to spend our constituents' money for benevolent reasons, essentially for charitable reasons. The founders of this country recognized it. When they were having that debate, it was actually about, I believe they were talking about helping refugees from a war that want to come to America, and they were talking about giving them money to help them start up. And Madison's sitting there saying, look, we're not a charity to this person. Kentucky's not a charity. We are not a charity. The government was never supposed to be a charity. It was instituted, once again, to protect our God-given rights. That's it. The Constitution is not a list of things that the government can do. And then all these other things. The Constitution is a limit on what the government is supposed to be doing. And this isn't just a Democrat thing. We've seen Republicans time again, Democrats time again, also going in and expanding the powers of government. Expanding the powers of government constantly. And then we wonder these things. We talk about these people going this fight over people going hungry of SNAP benefits. Maybe it's not a great idea to be relying on the government to feed our people, but nobody's talking about that. All we hear people talking about, even on the Republican side in this state, even in that own hearing where they were talking about this meals program, was how do we get more money and service more people and quote unquote help more people? Nobody's talking about how do we get people off these programs. Off these programs. I'm familiar with the way, like, for an example, the WIC program is run. And one of the biggest markers for these programs, I know an administrator of one of the WIC programs within the country. That's why I know somewhat of how their success is measured. And when they look at their area, so let's say you're over Louisville, WIC administrator over Louisville. And they look at it and they say, oh, there's 300,000 people that would be eligible for the WIC program. Our mark of success is how do we get more people enrolled on this WIC program? It should be how do we get more people able to provide for their own families and off these programs, but that's not a thought or care in the world. Doesn't cross their minds. Measure of success. How many people do we have enrolled? Measure of success. How short's the waiting list? Measure of success. How many meals are we giving out? Not how many Kentuckians are able to stand on their own 2 feet. All the time we hear from the left here. This is something I hear as a more, at least states' rights leaning / not really even states' rights person, but more of a libertarian-esque government role in people's lives. Where I talk about, look, we need to stop allowing the federal government to tell Kentucky what to do, because it's killed our industries like coal, like. We're having issues with hemp. I'm doing an interview on that later today. That'll be out later this week. Like tobacco. Killed that industry, right? How do we break free from the federal government constantly destroying Kentucky? When you look at Kentucky's coal industries, timber, the money industries, timber, coal, hemp, tobacco, now soybeans. All of these are so affected by federal policy. It's like they're breaking our leg and then asking us to, and then having us fill out forms to get a crutch from them. How do we get them to not break our leg in the first place? Then we wouldn't have to worry about how many illegal immigrants are getting these things because nobody's getting it because we're able to provide and survive on our own. That's not a thought crossing anybody's minds. When you look at Republican or Democrat, when you look at Republican side of things, when we're talking about what their expansions are, here's a great example. This last, they had their retreat, okay, their caucus retreat. And one of the big issues they talked about was nuclear power and how they're going to do everything they can to allow a nuclear power plant to open up here in Kentucky. Well, I understand the ideas of clean energy and everything else. Last I checked, we don't have uranium mines in Kentucky. I don't even know if you need a uranium mine for a nuclear. I'm just saying things now. But what we do have is coal mines. So we're going to remove all the regulations we can to allow a nuclear power plant specifically to kill more coal jobs. Why? When we should be saying, look, remove the federal regulations on power that artificially increases the cost of coal energy. That should be what we're fighting for. Removing as many of the inflated expenses that goes into coal energy. Because, of course, they couldn't get renewable energy like wind and solar to be cheap enough. I mean, I drove by a solar farm on my way in here. All the panels covered in snow. Completely unreliable. But in order to make sure, because those are so expensive, in order to offset those costs and get that to be an attractive option, they've artificially increased the cost of coal and coal power. And so instead of fighting that, hey, let's kill more coal jobs. And those are the things that it's just, oh my goodness gracious. Just stop. Just stop. Let's see here. Got another text here. Someone says, I love your show. Thank you. Well, thank you. I'll end on that positive note. I love your show. Well, thank you for listening. I love you listening. How about that? It's good to know I'm not just screaming off into a void sometimes. But if you do like what you're hearing, you can check out the Andrew Cooperrider Show. That's on also once a week, different than this Wednesday. It's here on WGTK at 6 p.m. You can on Sundays at 6 p.m. It's also on WBNA on the TV there Wednesdays at 11. You can also check out the Andrew Cooperrider Show by visiting theandrewshow.com. That comes out weekly. But, I'm here on Wednesdays.